A single letter proved my mother never died and woke the darkness we tried to bury. My mother pretended I had died to protect me from a very dark secret. As a child, I grew up with a different identity and discovered everything through a mysterious letter. From a young age, I was told that my mother had died the day I was born. Every time someone said that, I would lower my head and pretend nothing was wrong, but inside it hurt. It was a pain that couldn't be explained in words, something strange. I would see other girls when their moms picked them up from school, when they hugged them at the end of the day, and that left me feeling empty. I tried not to cry because my grandmother said I had to be strong, but I did cry in secret, hugging my pillow. Sometimes I would ask why my mom had to die right when I was born, and they always told me the same thing. She loved you very much. She gave her life for you. That was supposed to comfort me, but it only made me feel all alone. I imagined her face, her smell, her voice, but everything was empty. I had no memories, no photos, no signs, just that repeated story, as if it were a wall that no one wanted to cross. And even though I was very young, something inside me felt that something was not right. It wasn't just sadness. It was an unanswered question. It was as if a part of me was missing. And no matter how much everyone around me tried to make me feel complete, I felt like I was only living half of my truth. I spent my entire childhood in a very small town in the interior of Nogales. The streets were dirt, the houses simple, with red tile roofs and windows open to let the air in. Everyone knew each other there. In the mornings, I used to smell freshly baked bread, and in the afternoons, I could hear the chickens in the yards. I lived with my grandmother Carmen, a woman with firm hands and a big heart. She was my world. She took care of me, as if I were a treasure. Every time I asked about my mother, she would pull me close, look me in the eyes, and say with a sad smile, "You are a blessing from heaven, my girl, a gift that God gave me." That left me confused, but I held on to those words as if they were a rope to keep me from falling. She did everything she could to give me love, even though we had little. Sometimes she would sell flowers in the plaza and come back with a little piece of candy just to see me smile. Other times, she would tell me made-up stories so I could sleep without crying. The house was small, only 2 rooms, but full of love. She cooked beans like no one else, and on cold nights she would cover me with 2 blankets, even though I told her it wasn't necessary. I remember her wrinkled hands combing my hair and the smell of soap she always had. Grandma Carmen was my safe place, and even though I didn't understand why my parents weren't there, I felt protected there. But the hole inside me remained silent, hidden, like a question that still had no answer. One day, while helping Grandma fold some rags on the clothesline, I gathered my courage and asked her in a low voice, "Grandma, what about my dad? Did he die too?" She stopped what she was doing, stared at the sky for a moment, and then looked down. Her face changed instantly, as if I had touched an old wound. She didn't answer me right away. She took a deep breath and said in a firm voice, "It's better not to remember your dad, sweetie. He wasn't a good man." I didn't really understand what that meant, but I insisted because I wanted to know. But he knew me. He knew about me. She just shook her head slowly and said, "He didn't deserve you. It's best to forget that name." I remained silent, trying to understand. I was just a little girl who wanted to know where I came from. But every time I talked about my dad, Grandma changed the subject, went to make coffee, or said she was tired. She never yelled at me, but I could tell that the subject hurt her. Out of respect, I stopped asking. But the truth is that her silence only raised more questions in me. What kind of man was he? Why was she so afraid to tell me? It was as if my story had a dark hole right in the middle, and no one wanted to let me look inside. And even though I tried to obey and forget, I knew that one day those answers would find me. I was 7 years old that day. It was just another afternoon in the small town. I was playing with a rag doll in the yard when I felt someone watching me. I turned slowly and saw a woman standing on the other side of the wooden fence. She was wearing a simple dress, her hair loose and blowing in the wind. But what caught my attention most were her eyes. They were filled with tears. She wasn't crying, but she looked like she was about to cry at any moment. I stood there looking at her for a few seconds, not knowing what to do. My heart started beating faster. as if I already knew that woman, even though I had never seen her before. She smiled, but it was a sad smile, the kind that makes your chest tighten. I took 2 steps toward her, my wrist pressed against my chest, and asked her in a low voice, "Are you okay?" But before I could get any closer, she turned around and left. She disappeared among the trees as if she were afraid. I ran to the little gate in front. I looked around, but she was gone. It was as if she had never been there. I stood there trying to understand what had happened. That image stayed with me. Her eyes full of tears, the way she looked at me. There was affection in that look, but there was also pain. When I told Grandma Men, she turned pale. She tried to hide it by saying that maybe it was just some lady passing by, but I could see that she was nervous. She changed the subject and told me to go inside, and I was left with that strange feeling that I had seen someone important, someone who knew who I was, and that left me with even more questions. After that day, when I saw the woman looking at me with tears in her eyes, I started dreaming about her. At first it was only occasionally, but then the dreams became more frequent. She always appeared the same, in that simple dress with her hair down, waiting for me with open arms. In the dream, I would run to her, and she would hug me tightly, with great warmth, as if I were the most precious thing in her life. She would call me in such a sweet way, saying, "My girl," her voice breaking, as if she had missed me terribly. I felt so safe there in her arms. It was as if all the emptiness I had felt since I was little was filled with that love. I didn't want to wake up, but when dawn broke, I opened my eyes with my pillow wet from crying so much. I didn't understand why that dream moved me so much. It was just a dream, wasn't it? But her scent, the warmth of her embrace, the way she stroked my hair felt so real. There was something there that my heart felt, even though I didn't understand it. Sometimes I would wake up in the night calling her name. "My girl, my girl," it would echo in my head. It seemed like she wanted to tell me something, as if she were trying to reach me from far away. Awake, I would search for that look in the faces of the women passing by on the street. But none of them were her, and my grandmother never spoke of the subject. She said that dreams are just dreams, and sent me to breakfast. But my heart was already marked. I knew that woman was important, and I knew deep down that that dream was more than just something my mind had invented. It was a hidden memory, wanting to come back. Sometime later, it was a normal afternoon, one of those when Grandma went to church to take flowers. I was home alone and decided to tidy up some drawers in her room. But as I was taking some old rags out of the closet, I noticed that part of the wall sounded hollow. I tapped it with my knuckles, and it sounded different. I slowly pulled out a loose board, and behind it was a small wooden box covered in dust. My heart started beating very fast. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside I found some old things, a small medal, an embroidered handkerchief, and at the bottom of the box, a letter. It was a yellow envelope with the name Isabella written in beautiful, firm handwriting in the middle. It was my name. My eyes filled with tears instantly. I sat on the floor and began to read with sweaty hands. The letter began like this: "Isabella, my love, if you are reading this, it is because the moment of truth has arrived." I could hardly breathe. It was as if a voice was speaking to me directly from a place lost in time. My eyes raced across the words, and my chest felt like it was going to explode. The letter said that my mother was alive, that she hadn't died in childbirth, that she had left me with my grandmother to protect me from something very dangerous, that everything had been planned, my supposed death, my disappearance, my new identity, all to keep me away from a man who could hurt me. The words swirled around in my head. I felt so cold that I had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. My mother was alive. She had been alive all this time and left me. Why did she leave me? What danger was so great? Who was this man she feared so much? I read the letter and cried uncontrollably. It was a painful cry, as if everything I had believed until now had been shattered. My head was spinning. The pain of being abandoned was mixed with a strange hope. For the first time, the dream of that woman calling me her little girl made sense. She was real. And now more than ever, I needed to know the whole truth. After reading that letter about 10 times, crying silently on the floor of my room, I felt something inside me change. It was as if everything I had experienced up to that point had been a waiting game, waiting for that moment. I couldn't live with so many doubts anymore. I needed to look into my mother's eyes. I needed to understand why she left me, why she pretended I had died. And most of all, I needed to feel her real embrace, not just in my dreams. I waited for Grandma to leave early the next day. She always went to the square to sell flowers. While she was out, I packed a small backpack. I took only some clothes, the folded letter, and the little money I had saved in a small wooden box with a metal lid. Before leaving, I left a short note on the kitchen table. "Grandma, forgive me. I need to find my mother. I'll be back." That was the hardest part. My hands were shaking. My eyes were red. I wanted to hug her one last time, but I knew that if she saw me leaving, she would try to stop me, and I couldn't give up. Now I got on the bus with my heart in my throat. Every kilometer away from the village squeezed my chest tighter, but hope pushed my kicks forward. The letter said that my mother lived in Phoenix. She had left the village. The city was a new world, noisy, full of people and tall buildings. I felt small, alone, afraid, but also determined. For the first time, I was going to search for my truth, and nothing else mattered. When I got off the truck and set foot in Phoenix, I felt a tight knot in my chest. There were cars everywhere, people rushing around, horns honking, a noise that never stopped. So many people were passing by me, and yet I felt lonelier than ever. It was as if I had disappeared in the midst of so much life. I walked without knowing where to go. The address on the letter was written on a folded piece of paper that I clutched tightly, as if it were my only chance. My legs hurt, the sun beat down on my head, and I hardly knew how to ask for directions. I had never left my village before. I had never faced anything like this. But inside me, there was something that wouldn't let me give up. It was like a spark that wouldn't go out, even though I was scared, even though I was tired. I sat down on a bench in the square, near a large tree, and watched people pass by. I saw a mother holding her little boy's hand, and my heart tightened. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I had to keep going. I had to find my mother. I had to see her, hear her voice, find out what was true and what had been hidden. It didn't matter how big the city was, or how lonely I felt. That flame burning inside me was stronger than anything else, and I knew it. Only the truth could extinguish the pain I had carried in my chest since I was born. After walking aimlessly all day, I stopped in front of a simple little church in a quiet neighborhood. I entered with a weary heart and knelt on the last pew. I didn't know how to pray beautifully, but I closed my eyes and silently asked for help. I asked with all my strength for someone to show me the right path. It was there that I met Father Esteban, a man with a calm voice and eyes that seemed to understand people's pain just by looking at them. He approached slowly and sat down next to me. "Are you okay, dear?" he asked me kindly. I lowered my head and replied in a low voice, "I'm looking for my mother. I thought she was dead, but now I know she's alive. Her name is Maria Torres. Have you heard that name?" He remained silent for a few seconds, thoughtful. Then he looked at me carefully, as if thinking carefully about what he was going to say. "Maria Torres. That name rings a bell. There's a woman with that name who works at an orphanage nearby. It's a few blocks from here. Would you like me to take you there?" My heart began to beat very fast. It was as if a light had been turned on in the darkness. I nodded quickly and got up, my legs trembling. The priest took me by the hand and led me to the place. On the way, he told me about the orphanage, how Maria cared for the children with great love, as if they were her own. Every word he said gave me more hope. I felt that I was close, that the name Maria Torres was not just a coincidence. And inside me, that little flame that had kept me going alone in a huge city was now almost a blaze of hope. I needed to see her. I needed to know if she was really the woman of my dreams, the woman I had embraced with such longing. When I reached the door of the orphanage, my legs were shaking so much that I could hardly take the first step. Father Esteban squeezed my hand and said in a calm voice, "Go, my child. God is with you." I took a deep breath and went inside. Inside, I saw children running, laughing, playing, and then I saw her with her back to me, putting some toys in a basket, her hair loose. the same hair I saw in my dreams. The way she walked, the way she moved, it was her. My heart was beating so fast that it felt like it was going to jump out of my chest. I took 2 steps and said softly, "Mrs. Maria." She turned around, slowly. When our eyes met, the world stopped. She stood still, with her mouth half open, her eyes filled with tears instantly. She looked at me as if she were seeing a miracle. And then, her voice breaking, she whispered, "My child." That's when I knew. It was her, the woman of my dreams who called me my child, so tenderly, who hugged me at night when I cried in my sleep. I ran to her without thinking, without hesitation, without fear, and she opened her arms and welcomed me as if she had never let me go. We hugged there in the middle of the courtyard, with the sun on our backs and the noise of the children fading into silence. I cried like I had never cried in my life, a loud cry, held back for years. She was crying too. She whispered in my ear, forgive me, my love. I never stopped thinking about you." And I could only repeat, "Mom, Mom." In that embrace, time was erased. There was no more pain, no more doubts, no more fear. Only the reunion, only love. And for the first time in my life, I felt complete. After a while, when we finally stopped crying, we sat down in a corner of the orphanage, on a wooden bench near a tree. She held my hand tightly, as if she were afraid of losing me again. And I, although I still didn't understand everything, already felt that this moment would change my life forever. That's when she started to tell me the truth. With tears in her eyes and her voice trembling, she said, "Your father was a powerful man. He had money, influence, many bodyguards, but he was also very dangerous. He did bad things, daughter, things that I only discovered after being with him." She squeezed my hand tighter and lowered her head as if she had been carrying that weight for many years. "When I found out I was pregnant with you, the first thing I thought of was running away. I wanted to protect you, to give you a life far away from all that. But he found out, and one day he looked me in the eyes and told me that if the baby was his, he would take you away from me, that I would never see you again." She was silent for a moment. The silence that followed cut through the air. I could only look at her, trying to understand what a mother feels when she hears a threat like that. "That's when I decided to do the hardest thing in my life," she continued, her voice breaking. "I planned the lie that would separate me from you. I faked your death. I left you with Carmen, your grandmother, the only person I trusted, and I went into hiding." Tears came to my eyes without me realizing it. Part of me wanted to scream, to ask why so long away, but the other part could only feel the love behind it all. She left me to save me. She hid me from the man who could take me away from her forever, and lived in silence, suffering, waiting for the day when perhaps the truth would come out. I couldn't say anything at that moment. I was paralyzed, sitting on that old bench, with my mother's hand squeezing mine, and the world around me seemed so far away. The children were running around the orphanage courtyard, laughing, playing, and inside me everything was silent, as if every little piece of my story had broken at the same time. Everything I thought I knew, everything I had been told since I was a child, was a lie. The pain came in a strange way, as if it were new, but at the same time old, as if it had always been there inside, just waiting for the moment to come out. It was as if my past had been erased with an eraser, and now someone was trying to write over it, with tears instead of ink. I looked at her, my mother, the woman I had spent my life imagining, dreaming about, searching for in the faces on the street. She was there in front of me, and even though there were lies, even though so much time was lost, what I saw in her eyes was not evil. It was love, a sad, tired love, full of guilt, but still love. She started crying again, grabbed my face with her hands and said softly, "I never wanted to leave you, my girl. It was the only way I could find to save you. Every night I slept without you was like dying a little more. Forgive me." And at that moment, my heart fell silent. I felt that even though everything had been hidden, even though the pain was great, she loved me in the strongest way anyone can love. She hid me from the world because she wanted me to stay alive. She decided to suffer so that I wouldn't suffer. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes for a moment, and let the tears flow freely. Yes, everything I knew was a lie, but her love was real. and maybe that alone was the beginning of a new part of my life. She told me everything with tears in her eyes and a soft voice, almost without strength. After leaving me with Grandma Carmen, she had to disappear. She moved to another city, changed her name, and began to live as if she didn't exist. She told me that she woke up every day in fear. Fear that they would find her. Fear that someone would bring the past back. She lived with her doors closed, her windows covered, and her heart always afraid. She couldn't even smile properly anymore. She told me that even though she was surrounded by many children in the orphanage, none of them could fill the place I left behind, that she never wanted another child. She told me this with her hand on her chest, looking me straight in the eyes. I already had you. Even though you were far away, you were always my daughter, my life. I lived with your memory. That was what helped me get up every day. Those words hurt me deeply, because for years I cried, wanting to have her close, missing a hug, a voice that would say, "Daughter." And she, on the other side, lived hidden, as if she didn't exist because of me, to protect me, and that hurt more than any lie. Inside, part of me was still angry. Part of me wanted to scream. Why didn't you come back? Why did you let me grow up thinking you were dead? But that anger was small compared to what I really felt. Deep down, I just wanted to hug her again. I just wanted to make up for the time we lost. Even though I knew time couldn't be turned back, my heart longed for one more hug, one more moment with her, because even after everything that had happened, she was my mom, and the love I felt for her was greater than any pain. She told me that after leaving me with my grandmother, she never found peace again. Every day was difficult. She woke up early in fear. She went to sleep late in fear. She was afraid to go out, afraid that someone would recognize her face, afraid that someone who knew my dad would find her and discover everything. She lived in hiding, changing houses, changing jobs, always alone, always silent. She never married, never had another child. It wasn't because she couldn't, it was because she didn't want to. She told me this with tears in her eyes. My girl, after you, nothing made sense. I had already given everything I had. You were my whole life. There was no room for anything else. She kept drawings of me that my grandmother sent her in secret. Letters she never sent. She had a little album with dried leaves and pieces of paper with my scribbles from when I was little, all hidden away, as if that past were a secret that hurt her, but that she also loved. She lived on memories. She told me that many nights she would lie in bed and stare at the ceiling, wondering if I was okay, if I was smiling, if someone was combing my hair before I went to sleep. When I heard all that, something inside me broke again. I wanted to truly hate her for not coming back, for letting me grow up with that doubt, with that emptiness, for leaving me alone in so many moments when I just wanted my mom. But that anger didn't last. It was quick, weak, because immediately I felt the desire to hug her again, to never let her go, to make up for lost time, even though I knew that wasn't possible. All I felt was love, a love that hurt, that squeezed with great sadness, but love nonetheless. And I understood then and there that sometimes you hide not because you are a coward, but because of love, and that a mother's heart, even when she is far away, never stops beating alongside her child's. After that reunion, we knew we couldn't walk around together as a real mother and daughter. There was still too much danger. She was afraid that someone from the past would discover that I was still alive, so we began to see each other in secret. We met in quiet places, always away from prying eyes. Sometimes she would leave the orphanage early and meet me in the little square behind the church. Other times I would go to the back fence and she would wait for me with 2 hot coffees and a blanket. In those hidden moments, it was as if time stood still. We would sit together and she would start telling me stories about her childhood, when she was a little girl running barefoot through the fields. She told me about the street parties, about her great-grandmother's cooking, about the songs her father played on the radio while he cooked. And I listened to everything with an open heart, trying to remember every word as if it were gold. One afternoon, she began to sing softly. It was a simple song with few words, but the melody was sweet. I closed my eyes and let her voice carry me away. When she finished, she looked at me with eyes full of emotion and said, I used to sing that to you when you were still here." And she put her hand on her belly. Every night, she would put her hand there and sing softly. She dreamed of the day when she would hold you in her arms, watch you sleep while listening to her voice. At that moment, I had an overwhelming desire to go back to the past, to be a baby again, just to experience what we had missed. But even though it was late, that moment was ours. It was as if we were hiding there, trying to sew together the broken pieces of our story. She spoke with such affection, with such hidden nostalgia, that I felt her love entering me like a warm blanket on a cold day. And in those secret encounters, with shy giggles, old songs, and memories of a life that was almost never lived, we reconnected two halves, trying little by little to become one again. It was almost nighttime. The sky was already turning orange, and I left the orphanage with a warm heart after another meeting with my mom. We had laughed so much that day. She told me a funny story from when she was a child, and for a few minutes the pain I carried seemed to disappear. But as soon as I turned the corner of the main street, I felt something strange. I don't know how to explain it, but my whole body tensed up, as if someone were watching me. I walked faster, and that's when I saw it. A large black car with tinted windows was parked a little further ahead. At first I thought it was just a coincidence, but I kept walking, and it began to move slowly behind me. The sound of the tires on the pavement was louder than normal. My heart started beating very fast. My hands got cold. I tried not to look nervous. I turned onto another street. I walked faster, then even faster, almost running, and the car followed. It didn't honk its horn. It didn't get too close. It just followed me, silently. It was scary. At that moment, the fear I thought I had left behind came back with a vengeance. It was the same fear my mom talked about when she spoke of the past, the fear that they would find us, that something bad would happen again. I wanted to run to the orphanage, hug her, and say, "Mom, someone is following me." But I knew I couldn't take that risk. I had to stay calm. I had to protect her too. I went into a small store pretending I was going to buy something. I waited for the car to pass. My heart was still pounding. My legs were shaking. And there, hidden behind the candy shelf, I realized that our story was not yet one of reunions and hugs, and that what my mom feared most was perhaps closer than ever. After managing to lose the car, I went straight to the orphanage. The sky was already dark, and the city lights made it almost impossible to see the stars. I entered through the back door, as we always did so as not to attract attention. When my mom saw me, she immediately realized that something was wrong. My face was pale, my hands were still shaking, and my gaze was lost. She came running, grabbed me by the shoulders, and asked with a worried voice, "What happened, my girl? What was it?" I sat down slowly in a chair and told her everything. The car, the dark windows, how it followed me for several blocks. She turned pale instantly, her eyes filled with fear, the same fear she had carried inside for so many years. She jumped up and started pacing back and forth, clenching her hands, her heart racing. "We have to go. We have to go now," she repeated as if she were trapped in an old nightmare. "Run away?" I asked, my voice stuck in my throat. She looked at me again, and what I saw in her eyes was pure despair, as if everything were repeating itself, as if that car were a ghost from the past coming back to take everything away again. She shook her head, whispering that it was her fault, that she should have stayed away, that she should have protected me better. But I got up. I stood in front of her, took a deep breath, and with tears in my eyes I said, "I don't want to run away anymore, Mom. I waited my whole life to find you, and now that I have, I'm not going to run away again. I can't." She tried to convince me that it wasn't safe, that I didn't understand the danger, but I grabbed her hand tightly, looked her in the eyes, and said, "Yes, I understand. I've lived with that emptiness my whole life. Now that I have you, I want to fight together. We're not going to hide anymore. We're going to end this fear. I promise you." She cried. She hugged me so tightly that it seemed like the world could end right there and then, and she wouldn't let go. And in that embrace, I knew that the time for running away was over. Now was the time to face up to our history, our truth, and the love that, although hidden for so many years, never ceased to exist. After that conversation with my mom, I knew that we couldn't handle all of this alone. The fear was great, and there were many questions. We needed someone we could trust, someone who understood what we were going through, someone who could help us without asking more questions than answers. So I went back to the church and looked for Father Esteban. He was already waiting for me with that calm gaze that seemed to see into the soul. I told him everything that had happened with the black car, my mom's panic, my decision to stop running away. He was silent for a while, listening to everything, and then he said in a firm voice, "Maybe it's time for you to meet someone who can help you, someone who has also gone through pain similar to yours." That same day, he took me to a simple house in a distant neighborhood. There lived Tomas, a young man with a strong gaze and a face marked by life. When we met, I felt something strange. It wasn't fear or mistrust. It was as if he already knew a little of what was in my heart. We sat in the courtyard and he began to tell his story. He lost his mother when he was very young. He was raised by his grandmother and later discovered that she had also hidden him from a dangerous father. He said he lived for years in fear, trying to understand the pieces of his own story. When I finished telling him mine, he took a deep breath, looked at me sincerely, and said, "I know how it feels to be lost. I know what it's like to have to rebuild everything when your world falls apart. If you want, I can help you." My mom was silent for a few seconds, looking at him with teary eyes, and then spoke in a low voice. "Would you do that for us?" Tomas nodded and replied firmly, "I would do it, because no one deserves to live in fear, and because when you find someone with pain similar to yours, you can't turn your back on them." At that moment, I knew that he wasn't just a helper. He was someone that fate had put in our path to walk with us. And for the first time, I felt that we were no longer alone. With Tomas's help and Father Esteban's steadfast support, we began to touch the wounds of the past. It hurt, but it was necessary. The truth wasn't going to come on its own. We had to search for it, even though each step weighed more than the last. The first thing we wanted to know was about my dad, who he really was, what he did, who he hung out with. We started looking for old documents, newspaper articles, anything that mentioned his name. We pieced together bits and pieces as if we were putting together a difficult and painful puzzle. We discovered that he was much more dangerous than I had imagined. He was involved with dirty money, threats, violent people. People were afraid of him. No one spoke about him calmly. Some called him the man without a soul, without a heart. And although it was hard to know that, I had to face the truth. It was a rainy afternoon in the church hall, where the priest kept old newspapers, when Tomas came up to me with an envelope in his hands. He sat down next to me and said, calmly, "Isabella, he died 4 years ago. A car accident. Look, here it is." I read the news with cold hands. My father, the one I was afraid to meet, the one who had separated me from my mother, no longer existed. I felt relief, but also a strange sadness, because even though everything had happened, he was part of my history, a dark, difficult part, but one that had also shaped me. But the peace was short-lived. Tomas continued looking through the papers and found another name, one that always appeared alongside my father's in the old news articles, a name that sent shivers down people's spines when they heard it. Ruben Ortega. "This man," Tomas said with a serious look, "was your father's right-hand man. After his death, Ruben took everything. He continued with the business as if nothing had happened." My stomach churned. So it was him, the shadow that still followed me, the threat that was close by. Ruben had not forgotten the past, and now he might know that I was alive. I looked at Tomas, who squeezed my hand tightly as if to say, "I'm speechless, but you're not alone." And that's when we understood that the fight was just beginning, and we had to be strong, because what was coming could be harder than anything we had already been through. After days of searching for answers and gathering information, we were certain of something that made us tremble inside. Ruben knew about me. He knew I was alive. He knew my mother had hidden me all these years. He knew everything, and more than that, he wanted revenge. It wasn't just about money or the past. It was personal. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to hurt my mother, because according to him, she had betrayed his former boss. We started to be more careful. We avoided going out alone. We locked the doors and turned off the lights early. But even all that caution wasn't enough. One cold night, as the rain pounded on the windows, I was in the apartment my mother rented near the orphanage. She had just made some tea. We sat on the couch, talked quietly, and for the first time in a long time, she laughed, a light, sincere laugh. She even rested her head on my shoulder and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." After that, I went to take a shower, and everything happened in a matter of minutes. When I came out of the bathroom with a towel on my head, I saw that the light in the living room was off. I called my mom, but she didn't answer. I walked to the bedroom, and what I saw left me frozen. The bed was overturned, the pillows were on the floor, the lamp was broken, the drawers were open, and my mom was no longer there. I shouted her name, ran through the apartment, opened doors, windows, looked out the balcony, nothing. The only thing I could hear was the rain outside and the sound of my heart beating wildly. My body was shaking. I fell to my knees on the bedroom floor, trying to understand. The room looked like someone had invaded it quickly, silently, coldly. The only thing I knew was that they had taken my mom. My mom was gone. I felt like my world was falling apart again, as if something had been ripped out of me. I cried until I was out of breath. I cried out of pain, anger, and despair, because after all, after finding her, forgiving her, rebuilding, now she was gone, and everything I feared most had happened. But within that pain, something ignited. I wasn't going to give up. I was going to do whatever it took, because now I was the one who was going to protect her. After that night, I was never the same. I went out on the street wearing the same dress, my hair tied back any old way, without thinking about anything else. I could only think about her, about my mom, and about the question that wouldn't leave my head. Where was she? I spent days knocking on doors, talking to neighbors, asking people I didn't even know. I showed them an old photo of her, one that my grandmother had kept fondly. Some shook their heads. Others didn't even stop to listen. The answers were always empty. But even so, I kept going. I went back to the church several times. Father Esteban welcomed me with sad eyes. He gave me a bowl of hot soup. He told me to rest, but I couldn't. Tomas didn't leave my side either. He walked with me through the streets, entered alleys, helped ask in stores. He said, "We're going to find her, Isabella. I promise." But as the days went by, exhaustion began to take over. I hardly ate, hardly slept. At night, I would lie down in the same clothes, hugging a pillow that still smelled like her, and cry. I cried until my body ached, until my eyes burned, until I fell asleep from crying so much. I prayed silently, staring at the dark ceiling. Please, just one more chance, just one more hug. I missed her, as if something were burning inside me. Every corner of the house had something of her in it. The glass she used, the dishcloth that still hung there, the flip-flop forgotten under the bed. It was as if everything was screaming her name. And even though it hurt, even though I felt weak, I didn't stop. Because inside me, even though I was wounded, I still had that spark. The same spark that made me leave the village. The same spark that made me search for her all my life. Now it was my turn to save her, even if it was the last thing I did. It was a cold morning, the sky was cloudy, and the streets were still wet from the night's rain. I had slept in the back of the church, covered with a blanket that Father Esteban had lent me. I was awakened by the sound of the gate moving. When I went outside, I saw the priest standing at the church door with a serious expression on his face, holding something in his hands. It was a brown envelope, slightly dirty, with my name written on it in crooked letters. "This was here when I arrived," he said, handing it to me. I took it with trembling hands. The envelope was damp around the edges, as if it had been left there in a hurry. I opened it slowly, my heart pounding. Inside was a photo, and what I saw took my breath away. It was my mother, tied up, her arms tied behind a chair, her face beaten, her eyes full of fear. She looked tired, as if she hadn't slept in days. My eyes filled with tears immediately. My hand was shaking so much that I almost dropped the photo. Along with the photo was a note written in firm letters, unsigned, with only one sentence. "If you want to see her alive, come alone." I read and reread that sentence with a tight chest. I felt a despair that only those who truly love can understand. My legs gave way. I sat down on the first step of the church. Father Esteban knelt beside me. He tried to calm me down, but I could hardly hear him. Everything was spinning. That image of my mother tied up, beaten, was more than I could bear. I wanted to scream, but the fear was stronger. The fear of losing her. The fear that this note was a trap. I knew I could be walking straight into danger, but I also knew that if I didn't go, I might never see her again. The only certainty I had at that moment was this. I was going to go for her, for us, even though I was afraid, even though I was alone, because a daughter's love knows no distance, and I would cross the world if necessary. I went. I didn't think twice. Even though fear dominated my body, even though my hands were sweating, my heart was pounding, and my head was full of voices telling me it was dangerous, but I went for her, for my mother. I took the address that was on the back of the paper. It was a distant place on the outskirts of the city, where almost no cars passed. I got on a bus with my face covered with a scarf, my gaze lost, my heart broken inside. Every minute of the journey felt like an eternity. I remembered her photo, how she looked at the camera, as if asking for help directly from my heart. When I arrived, I saw the warehouse. It was large, old, with peeling paint, and a rusty iron door. The place was surrounded by silence. Not even the birds could be heard. I wanted to turn back, to scream, to run, but my legs pushed me forward. I pushed the door slowly. It squeaked loudly, and the sound echoed throughout the place. I took a few steps. There was little light. There was a smell of dampness in the air. And there, in the center of the warehouse, was he, Ruben, tall, in a dark suit, cold eyes, arms crossed. Behind him, in a dark corner, I saw my mother, still tied up, still hurt. "So you came," he said with a crooked smile. "Just like your mother, brave and foolish." I had trouble breathing. I wanted to run to her, but I stood still. I looked at him and tried to appear strong, but inside I was trembling all over. "You shouldn't be alive," he continued as he slowly approached. "When your mother ran away, she betrayed the man who trusted her. She betrayed the business. And now you are a problem, a threat. There are still people out there who were loyal to your father and to me. They are his shadow. And there are people who don't want scandals. People who would do anything to keep this story buried." He stood in front of me, looking at me as if I were just a piece in a dirty game. "If you talk, everything falls apart, and I can't let that happen. Do you understand?" My throat was dry. Tears were welling up, but I held them back. I looked him in the eyes, and even though I was scared, I said, "I'm not going to stay quiet, and you're not going to touch her." He laughed, a cold, soulless laugh, and at that moment I knew he was capable of anything. But I also knew something else. I was there for a reason. I was no longer that scared little girl who, even if everyone turned against me, would fight to the end to save my mom, even if it took every last ounce of strength I had left. When I saw Ruben's eyes grow colder, I sensed that something bad was about to happen. He took 2 steps toward me and raised his arm as if he were going to push me. My mother shouted from the back of the warehouse in a weak voice, "Leave her alone! Don't hurt her!" I was shaking, but I didn't move. I stood there, resisting the urge to run, expecting the worst. And just when I thought there was no way out, I heard the most beautiful sound I could hear at that moment. Tires screeching outside, then quick footsteps and shouts of command. "Police!" Nobody moved. It all happened very quickly. The warehouse door burst open, and several police officers entered with guns in their hands. Tomas was right behind them, breathing heavily, searching with his eyes until he found me. When he saw me, he ran towards me and pulled me back forcefully, protecting me with his body. Ruben tried to escape, but they surrounded him before he reached the door. He shouted and threatened, but he had nowhere to run. Tomas looked me in the eyes and said, panting, "The trap worked. You were very brave." I fell into his arms, trembling with relief, unable to hold back my tears. It was as if all the weight I had been carrying had suddenly fallen away. The police went to my mother, cut the ropes, and took her out of there. She could barely walk, but when she saw me, she opened her arms and whispered, "My girl, you saved my life." I ran to her and hugged her with all my strength. We cried together. There, in the middle of the dark warehouse, amid sirens and loud voices, we were both alive, and we were together. After all, After so many years, so much fear, so much pain, I had done it. She was free, and I had finally done for her what she had done for me when she decided to hide me from the world. I had protected her, and at that moment, there was no greater love in the world than that. Ruben was taken away by the police at that very moment, handcuffed, unable to hide the anger on his face. He still tried to shout that it wasn't going to end there, but no one heard him. For the first time, he was in the hands of justice. After so many years of making people suffer, he was now in prison, and I could only look at my mom. Maria was free, but her body told a different story. She was weak, hurt, with bruises on her arms and wrists. Her eyes, which had always been so lively, were now dull, as if they had lost their color. When we took her to the hospital, she could barely stand. I sat next to her, took her hand, and stayed there the whole time without letting go. Tomas also stayed with us, always attentive, helping with everything. The doctors said she needed to rest, eat well, and regain her strength little by little, and that's what we did. We rented a small, simple room, but it was clean and safe. I put light curtains on the windows, flowers on the table, and every morning I made her chamomile tea, just like she used to make for me during our secret meetings. She spent hours lying down, sometimes without talking much, just staring at the ceiling. But I knew that inside, she was gathering the pieces of her soul, and I was doing the same, because taking care of her was also taking care of myself. And then, one day, as I was tucking her in, my mom gently took my hand, looked me straight in the eyes with a tear slowly rolling down her cheek, and said in a soft voice, "Thank you, my girl. Thank you for not letting go of my hand." I squeezed her hand tightly, brought it to my face, and kissed it slowly, and I replied with a full heart, "I love you, Mom." It was the first time I had called her that, without fear, without shame, without doubt. And she cried, but it was a beautiful cry, a cry of relief, of love, of finding each other again. There, in that simple room, among pillows and band-aids, we were starting over, for the first time as mother and daughter, for real, and nothing else in the world mattered. After my mom started to get better, when she could walk on her own and smile a little, I knew it was time to go back to where it all began, to our roots. We took a bus with a few suitcases, simple clothes, and hearts full of nostalgia. Tomas went with us, always by our side. The trip to the little town seemed longer than I remembered. Every curve in the road brought back a childhood memory, a scene that used to hurt, but now began to feel different. When we got off at the little square, everything looked the same. The trees were still there, as were the wooden benches, but something inside me had changed. And when we turned the last corner, and I saw Grandma's house, I felt my chest fill with emotion. The door opened slowly, as if she had sensed our presence. And there was Grandma Carmen, her white hair pulled back in a simple bun, her apron still tied around her waist, and her eyes were shining like never before. When she saw me, she covered her mouth with her hand and cried. But when she saw my mom, her body relaxed. She descended the porch steps with difficulty and hugged my mother with a strength that seemed impossible for someone her age. "I never lost faith," she said, her voice breaking. "I always knew that one day you would come back, that day would come." The three of us stood there hugging, crying as if the world had stopped. It was the longest hug of my life, a hug of forgiveness, of finding each other again, of love that survived everything. After that, we started over, little by little, carefully. The house was slowly fixed up. We changed the curtains, cleaned the yard, planted new flowers. My mom started cooking again, something she hadn't done in years. Grandma told stories at night, just like when I was a little girl, and I would sit on the kitchen floor just to hear the two of them laugh as they baked bread. The past still existed. Of course, the pain didn't magically disappear, but now there was something new. There was peace and hope, and that beautiful desire to experience everything we hadn't been able to experience before. Together, as it always should have been, it was one afternoon, sitting on the park bench where I used to play as a child, that Tomas told me something that moved me in a way I didn't expect. The sun was hiding behind the trees, and the wind was blowing softly in my face. He was silent for a moment, looking at the ground as if searching for courage in his words. "Isabella, there's something you need to know," he said in a low voice. "My mom also suffered because of your dad." I looked at him without understanding immediately, and he continued. "She worked for him for a while when she was young. She was abused, threatened, humiliated. When she found out she was pregnant from a relationship with one of his partners, she left in fear. She lived in hiding, just like your mom. That's why, when I met you, when I heard your story, I felt as if it were also mine. At that moment, something connected us in a different way. It was as if our pain recognized each other. I reached out and took his hand. We said nothing more. There was no need. The silence said it all. After that day, Tomas and I became even closer. He never left my side. He helped me with things around the house. He went with me to the market. He sat next to me in the afternoons, when I just wanted to be quiet and think about life. And little by little, without haste, without pressure, something new began to grow. It was a feeling unlike anything I had ever felt before. He looked at me with such sincere affection that it seemed to heal me just with his gaze. And when he smiled, the world felt lighter. I began to wait for him every day. I needed his laughter, his calm voice, his way of saying just what I needed to hear when everything seemed like a mess. We didn't talk about love at first. We just felt it day after day, and that feeling grew inside us like a little plant that grows slowly but strongly, with deep roots. It was love, yes, but it was more than that. It was respect. It was care. It was a secure hug after so many hugs that were missing. And there, in the midst of so much pain from the past, something beautiful was born. A new beginning, a love made of truth, patience, and all those things we were never given, but which we now gave to each other without fear. One day, while my mom and I were sitting on the terrace drinking coffee and watching the sky change color, a girl appeared at the door. She was wearing a flowery dress and carrying a bag of fresh bread. I looked at her, and for a second, my heart stopped. Those eyes, that smile, I knew them. She smiled broadly and said, "Isa, it's me, Elena." I jumped up. It was her, my childhood friend. I ran to her and hugged her tightly. We hugged as if no time had passed, as if we were still two girls running barefoot across the earth. After we went inside, we sat on the couch, and she began to talk. She said she never stopped thinking about me, that when my grandmother told her I had left, she felt it wasn't just a trip, that there was something more. And then, with tears in her eyes, she confessed, "Isa, even when we were girls, I always felt that there was something strange about your story. It was like a shadow, a silence. I heard my mom talking to the neighbors. They talked about your mom. They whispered things I didn't quite understand, but that left me with a tightness in my heart." She looked me in the eyes and took my hand. "I wanted to ask you. I wanted to take care of you, to do something, but I was just a child. I didn't know how. Forgive me for staying silent." I couldn't say anything. I just hugged her again, feeling a mixture of nostalgia, gratitude, and emotion. It was as if another piece of my story had fallen into place. Having Elena back was like rediscovering a beautiful part of my childhood that I thought I had lost forever. And in that tight hug, I understood that even in the darkest moments, there were always people around me who loved me, who cared, even if silently, and that gave me more strength to carry on. After everything I had been through, all the tears I had cried, all the hugs I had put back in their place, I realized that I couldn't keep it all inside me. So I sat down at the kitchen table with paper and pen and wrote a letter. But it wasn't for anyone in particular. It was for myself. I wrote it calmly, remembering every detail, as if I were telling everything to the girl I once was. That girl who grew up believing her mother had died, who felt lonely on her birthdays, who slept crying while hugging a pillow. I wrote everything in the letter, the pain, the fears, the reunions, the silences, and the screams that never came out. I told her about my mother, about my grandmother, about Tomas, about the warehouse, about Ruben. I told her how love can survive even in the darkest places. And at the end, I wrote, "If one day you forget who you are, read this letter, because you are made of courage. You were not abandoned. You were saved. And today, you are here, alive, strong, loved. I folded it carefully and put it in a little wooden box along with a photo of me with my mom. It was more than just a piece of paper. It was my story, my truth. After that, I started going to the orphanage, the same one where my mom worked for so many years. The first time I walked in, after all, my heart ached. I remembered the children running around, the toys scattered on the floor, their little hands reaching out for affection. I started slowly, helping with meals, telling stories, drawing with the children. But I soon realized that I wasn't just bringing help. I was bringing my presence. I was bringing hugs. I was bringing a listening ear. And that was exactly what I always wanted when I was a child. To be seen, to be heard, to be cared for. One day, a little girl tugged at my shirt and asked, "Are you the new caregiver?" I smiled, crouched down to her level and replied, "No, sweetheart. I am someone who was once like you. And now I want to be here to remind you that you will never be alone." And in that little girl's gaze, I saw the hope I thought I had lost. I saw the opportunity to do something different, to turn my pain into care, because now I knew. The love we give is the most beautiful part of what we have experienced. It was a quiet night, one of those nights when the silence seems to listen to you. My mom and I were sitting on the terrace looking at the starry sky with 2 cups of hot tea in our hands. The breeze was gentle, and the scent of Grandma's flowers wafted in from the garden. Suddenly, my mom became serious, her eyes lost somewhere far away. I noticed. I knew that look. It was the look of someone who has been carrying a heavy burden for a long time. She took a deep breath and said to me, "Isabella, there's something I never told you, something about me when I was a child." I remained silent, waiting. She squeezed the cup with her hands, as if seeking strength, and continued. "I also grew up with a lie. They told me that my dad had abandoned me, that he didn't want anything to do with me. All my life, I thought he was a bad man. But years later, I discovered that he tried to see me many times, and my mom wouldn't let him. Out of anger, out of pride, he died without knowing if I would forgive him." She was silent for a moment, her eyes filled with tears, and said almost in a whisper, "The pain I felt when I learned that was the same as the pain I saw in your eyes when you learned the truth about me. That's why I understood your silence, your anger, your tears, because I went through that too. The lie stole a part of my life, and I didn't want it to steal yours too." I reached out and took her hand. We stood there, united by the same kind of pain, an old pain that passes from mother to daughter like an invisible thread. But there was also something new in that touch, a wordless forgiveness, a love that was reborn, even though it was full of scars. Then I understood that at first, the lie seems to protect you, but over time, it becomes a prison. Lies confuse, alienate, and the truth, even if it hurts, liberates, opens the way to healing, to starting over. I looked at my mom and said with a clear heart, "Thank you for telling me. Now I understand. And even though everything has happened, I choose you, I accept you, I love you." She smiled, and the tears flowed freely. And that night, 2 broken stories found peace, because the truth, even if it comes late, still has the power to heal. In the quiet of the early morning, after a day full of memories, I dreamed of him, my dad, that man who for so long was just a shadow in my life. In the dream, he was different. He wasn't the strong, cold man I had always been told about. He was sitting in an old chair with his hands over his face, crying. He cried like someone who regrets something he can no longer change. When he saw me, he slowly got up and walked toward me, his eyes red, his face tired, and said, his voice trembling, "Forgive me, daughter. Forgive me for everything." I couldn't say anything. I just looked at him, and inside, I felt a strange mixture of pain, anger, and at the same time, a peace I didn't know existed. He tried to touch me, but the dream began to fade. Before everything went dark, he repeated, "Once again, forgive me." I woke up with my face covered in tears, my pillow wet, my chest tight. I lay there, staring at the dark ceiling, not knowing if it was just a dream or if he had somehow come to say goodbye, if it was real or just my soul trying to make peace with the past. But I felt one thing: there was no more hatred, No more weight, just the emptiness left behind by what could have been. That same morning, I took an old photo of my mother and grandmother together, smiling on a sunny day in the village, and put it in a pretty, simple wooden frame. I placed it in my room on top of the dresser, where I can always see it. Every day before I go to sleep, I look at it. Sometimes I whisper to them, "Good night, my girls." Sometimes I just smile. That photo became my refuge because it shows the two women who loved me the most, each in her own way, each with her mistakes, but with a love that never failed me, even when I thought I was alone. It is by looking at that photo that I remember who I was, what I experienced, and what I became. And it is there, in that moment, quiet before sleep, that I give thanks for everything, even for the pain, because it was that pain that brought me here. It was an afternoon with the sky painted orange and pink when Tomas took me to a special place. It was a simple piece of land behind Grandma's house, where the grass grew freely and the wind blew, telling secrets. He said he wanted to teach me something. We walked in silence, side by side, with the quiet affection of those who have lived together for a long time. In the middle of the field, he stopped. He looked at me with that shy smile I knew so well, and took a small box made of a carefully folded piece of cloth out of his pocket. He gave it to me slowly, as if he were giving me his heart. I opened it with trembling hands, not knowing what to expect, and inside, I saw the most beautiful ring I had ever seen in my life. It was not made of gold or silver. It was made of wood, simple, handmade. He had carved it himself, with the marks of his fingers and with all the love in the world. It had a small heart engraved inside, almost hidden. "I made it for you with my own hands," he said, his eyes filled with tears, "because everything I have to give you comes from who I am, from what I feel, from what we have built together." I couldn't hold back the tears. Everything was so pure, so true, that I felt my heart was going to burst out of my chest. "Will you marry me, Isabella? Will you be my family?" he asked, his voice trembling. I could only smile and nod my head, saying yes with all the strength of my heart. A yes full of history, of pain, of overcoming many things, but also of love. A yes that carried everything we had lived through, everything we had dreamed of. A yes that was not just an answer, it was a promise. Tomas hugged me tightly, and there, with the wooden ring on my finger, I felt that life was giving me back everything it had once taken away. It wasn't about luxury, parties, or expensive clothes. It was about truth, about starting over, about loving after the storm. And I knew in that embrace that it had all been worth it, because now I had found my home in him, in us. Time passed, and little by little, life began to take on its rhythm again. Mornings became lighter, nights less silent. And one day, while washing the dinner dishes, I heard something that made me stop and close my eyes. It was my mom, singing very softly, with that voice that had been silent for so long, the same voice from my dreams, the same song she said she sang to me when I was still in her belly. She was on the terrace, rocking gently in her chair, looking at the stars, and singing, as if she were singing for the wind, to carry everything to God. Everything she had kept silent for so many years was sweet. It was strong. It was a hug without hands, a love that could be felt without touching. Sometimes in the early morning I still hear her, and when I hear her I feel protected, like when I was a child, and thought that someone was watching over me from afar. With everything we went through, with every tear, every hug, everything we discovered, I felt I had to write it all down, not just for myself, but for other people who may also have unanswered questions, pains that no one sees. So I sat in a little corner of the house with an old notebook and a blue pen and started writing. I wrote everything from the beginning, from the day I heard that my mother had died, to the day I heard her sing again. I called the book The Letter That Changed My Life, because it was that hidden letter, written with so much love and fear, that changed everything, that made me leave the village, that made me find the truth, that brought my mother back to me, that showed me who I am. And today, when I look back, I no longer see only the pain. I see the path, I see the steps, I see every little piece of my story pieced together with love and courage. I am not just someone who survived. I am made up of everything I have experienced. Every tear that fell on my pillow. Every strong hug that held me. Every mama said with all my heart. I am made of love, pain, and a strength that came from the women who raised me with all their hearts. And because of that, because of all that, I keep going and smile because I won. I still cry, yes, and I'm not ashamed. But now it's different. Before, I cried out of pain, out of longing, out of feeling empty. I cried over unanswered questions, over the hugs I didn't get, over cold nights without affection. Now, when the tears fall, they have a different taste. They come full of gratitude. Gratitude for seeing my mother again, for feeling her embrace, the one I waited for my whole life. Gratitude for every person who helped me, who was with me, even when I no longer had the strength. Gratitude for still being here, alive and whole after so much. Sometimes I cry just remembering the smell of my grandmother's coffee, Maria's voice singing softly on the terrace, Tomas's smile as he waited for me at the door with a flower he had picked from the garden. I cry because I was cared for, and because I am able to care for others today, because there is a special moment that makes me cry in a way that only the heart understands. It's when I'm at the orphanage, sitting on the floor, surrounded by children with curious eyes and outstretched hands, and one of them approaches me with that innocent look, touches my arm, and asks me in a sweet voice, "Isabella, can I hug you?" At that moment, I melt, because that simple question says it all. It says trust. It says affection. It says that great desire to feel love. And when I open my arms and that child throws himself into my chest, hugging me tightly, I feel that it was all worth it. Every pain, every weight, every step, because I became what I always dreamed of finding. I became a shelter. I became a refuge. I became someone for those who cannot yet speak. And it is there, in that tight hug, where I find meaning in everything. There, in the midst of a childhood that can still be saved, I find mine again, and I heal, and they heal me every day with love. Now tell me in the comments, what would you do in Isabella's place? Would you have the courage to seek the truth without knowing what you would find? Or would you do as Maria did, trying to protect those you love with silence and distance? I would love to hear your opinion. And don't forget to click the bell to receive the next videos here on the channel. There are many stories coming that will touch your heart. Take advantage and send this video to someone you love. Maybe that person needs to hear this message today. And look, the video that's coming up here on the screen now is a beautiful, real story that has already made many people cry and think about their whole lives. Click and get ready, because it's emotional from start to finish. I'll be waiting for you there.